Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you try to make life go your way, it just never does? Like you're pushing and you're planning and you're controlling and still nothing is moving in the direction that you hoped it would. That is essentially where I have been. I have always been a very hard worker. I pride myself on my work ethic. I grew up with a very strong and resilient single mother who taught me early on that if I want a good life, I'm gonna have to be the one who gets it for myself. Nobody else is gonna hand it to me. I have to work for it. And as a kid, I busted my butt working, even though I had no clue how to actually achieve this big and beautiful life that I was dreaming of. What I did know was that I wanted freedom. I wanted the kind of freedom that my mom never got to experience. I wanted the ability to be able to take care of her and to take care of my sisters and to eventually take care of my own future family. Being the child of an immigrant and being an immigrant myself, it comes with a certain kind of pressure. Not necessarily any pressure that is put on you, but a kind of pressure that you put on yourself. My mom brought me to America for a better life, and I felt like it was my responsibility to create that. Growing up, we never had much, and my mom worked night and day to put a roof over our head and put food on the table, and it was not easy, and I saw that every single day growing up. I'd always babysit, or we'd have my grandma come and help a lot. So from a young age, I learned what it's like to carry a weight on my shoulders. So when I moved to California, I was 100% certain that I was going to build something meaningful. But here's the funny thing about certainty. It is human nature to crave it, especially when life feels unclear and uncertain. I honestly thought that once I got to LA, everything would just fall into place. Instead, I felt like my path was shifting again. I dropped out of college. I bounced from job to job working in corporate America, trying to convince myself that each new role that I got was going to be the right fit for me, and that was going to help me within my search for fulfillment and a better life. But with every single step that I took, I felt less and less certain. I was chasing stability, but instead I ended up feeling more lost and more insecure and less stable. And maybe you have felt that way too. You feel like you're doing all of the right things only to feel more and more disconnected from yourself. For me, content creation was never necessarily part of the plan, but it was the first thing that actually felt like it was mine.
Hi, hello. Today we are going to do a special kind of video. We're going to be doing, okay, it's not that special.
Most of us have a timeline in our heads of how our life should go and how it should look like. And when it doesn't match, we start to feel like we're failing. At least that's how I felt. But here's the thing that I'm starting to realize. I have always had this constant need for control, for certainty, for timelines, for a life that looks exactly the way that I imagined it to look like. And that obsession has completely blurred my ability to see the good that's already there. I've also realized that I have this really bad habit of holding on to my stress and nurturing it like I would a child. I check up on it, I feed it, I give all of my energy to it, and the more that I tend to it, the more attention that I give it, the more that it grows. I'm starting to actually see that when you loosen your grip on all of the wrong things that you are giving your attention to, you start to create space for all of the right things to start coming and flowing into your life. When you stop forcing life to fit into your timeline, it starts to unfold in the way that it was always meant to. And if I'm being completely honest, I hold on to everything so tightly. I have a death grip on everything. Even when I drive, like my steering wheel, I have a death grip on it. I obsess over things, I stress over social media numbers, YouTube numbers, my mistakes, even little things like I stress when dinner didn't turn out the way that I wanted it to turn out. And most importantly, I have always obsessed and stressed over the fact that my life does not look the way that I wanted it to in my head. It doesn't match the timeline that I created for myself. So I try to control every little thing in order to try to force it to fit, because I constantly feel like I'm running out of time to accomplish that timeline, which I know sounds so silly, and I'm starting to realize that. But the awareness does not make it any less exhausting. I want you to do something for me. I want you to pause for just a second, and I want you to ask yourself, what's the thing that you're gripping onto so tightly that it is draining you of all of your energy? And what would it feel like to actually loosen that grip? Because a lot of times the things that we are holding onto are not even within our control. So how can we expect for those things to change or to improve if they're completely out of our control? I was recently listening to a sermon, and the pastor said, just because you don't see God's hand doesn't mean he's not there. And when she said that, it resonated so much, because isn't that true? Think about a time in your life when you felt like everything was falling apart, and then months later you look back only to realize it was leading you to something bigger and something better. At the time it made absolutely no sense, and you were overwhelmed and you felt crushed because you were going through something so hard and something so unimaginable to you, like you couldn't possibly believe that it would lead to something good. But looking back, you saw God's fingerprints all over it. When I first moved to LA, I had a remote job that barely covered rent and a few groceries here and there. It wasn't much, but it was the only stable thing that I had. After a couple of months, I got laid off, and I was absolutely crushed because I felt like I lost the only stable thing that I had in this new state, where, by the way, I had nobody here. I had no friends, no family, nobody. This resulted in me having to go back to working in the restaurant industry, which I swore I'd never go back to. And it just felt like I was backpedaling by a lot. And I just remember thinking, like, God, why? Did you seriously put me moving to California on my heart only to have me do the same thing that I had been doing before? Did you truly bring me here only to have it all fall apart? But now looking back, I see that his hand was all over that season of my life. That season forced me to rely on him more than ever. It also pushed me into content creation, the one thing that I have right now and the one thing that I still feel like is truly mine. You know, everybody always says it's not a rejection, it is redirection, and that is exactly what that season of my life was. These last few years of pivoting and failing and starting over, I now realize have not been random. They're what happens when you try to control every little detail of your life. And yet God tells us to not lean on our own understanding. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. For so long, I wanted to make my own paths straight. I wanted the roadmap. I wanted the certainty, the plan. But God's been asking me to trust him, to delight myself in him, and let him place the right desires in my heart. And I think that for the first time in my entire life, I'm starting to understand and realize that surrendering is not a weakness. It's actually alignment. It's the only way to stop exhausting myself and finally live in peace. I don't have all of the answers, but I can share a few things that definitely have been working for me and have been allowing me to change my mindset and perspective on life lately. These are little practices that have been teaching me how to live more slowly and more intentionally. And additionally, they have been helping me loosen my grip on everything in my life. I've been devoting my mornings to starting the day off with God. I try to listen to a sermon while I'm getting ready, making my coffee, doing my skincare. Ed Milet, who I really love to listen to, actually talks about something called emotional homes. Mine tends to lean towards the more negative side. I guess I would say I'm a little bit more melancholy by default. So the reason of why I like to listen to these sermons first thing in the morning is because I need that affirmation to start my day off on the right foot. I need to fill myself up with wisdom from people that I trust, people whose words will put me into a better mindset, and essentially listening to something that inspires me and motivates me. And doesn't matter how much work you put into yourself, self-improvement is a constant journey. You're never going to be 100%. You constantly need to fill your cup up. So listening to these sermons and listening to these motivational speakers always just puts me into such a good headspace before the day even begins. It's just this reminder of, hey, we are going to be good today. We are working towards better things. We are not going to default to our basic instincts. I've also been trying to wake up a little bit earlier just to make sure that I have time for all of the things that I want to do first thing in the morning. For so long, I have treated reading the Bible like a thing to check off my to-do list. I'd open it, I'd read a chapter, and then I'd close it without feeling connected to anything. If I'm being honest, reading the Bible has always been such a struggle for me, partially because it's just like hard to understand. I need things to be explained to me in a very thorough and easy to digest way, and the Bible does not always do that. Sometimes I feel like you need to really read in between the lines, which is why I love listening to sermons or reading devotionals, things like that. So not only would I read the Bible without really learning anything or getting anything out of it, I'd often feel almost like turned off by it because I'm just like, I don't want to do it. There's nothing for me there. And it's so funny because I was listening to a pastor and she said, when you don't feel like reading the Bible, that is exactly when you need it the most. That is exactly when you should be reading the Bible. And that hit me so hard because for the last, I'd say 2 years, I have been almost like avoiding reading it. I'll skim it, or it almost feels like a chore. So after hearing that sermon, I decided that moving forward, I'm going to take a different approach to it. I'm reading the New Testament from the very beginning, and before I even open that Bible up, I am praying and asking God to help me understand whatever he's trying to teach me that day. I literally say, show me what you want me to learn, and literally help me understand this text. I've also been doing my morning pages. As I mentioned before, I'm reading The Artist's Way, and I'm also doing the journaling alongside it, which is 3 pages of journaling every single morning. Instead of filling those pages with complaints, instead of filling those pages with negativity, which is how I've always treated journaling, honestly, I have been taking a different approach. I'm intentionally speaking joy and possibility over my life. And instead of dwelling on my circumstances or dwelling on the things that aren't going right or aren't turning out in my favor, I'm leaving those things at God's feet because I'm trusting that he has it all figured out, and I am just, my hands are off. I'm also learning what it actually means to build a relationship with God, and not just saying, yeah, I'm a Christian, I believe in God. Believing in God is very different from walking with God. Believing in God is you saying, yes, I know he exists, I acknowledge his existence. But walking with God is different. Walking with God means inviting him into your everyday life. It means talking to him, asking him for guidance, leaning on him when you're uncertain, and trusting him when you don't see the plan and when you don't know what's going to happen next. And that is what I have been slowly but surely learning how to do. And it is different. It is very different, and I can feel it. It sounds so weird, but I can literally feel the difference. Another shift has been leaning into doing things that I genuinely enjoy, which has been a lot of fun for me. Life can feel so monotonous. Work, go to the gym, work more, go to sleep, wake up, work, go to the gym, work more, go to sleep. Especially in the economy that we're in right now. Everything is just stressful, everybody's in a bad mood, and everything just, nobody sees the light at the end of the tunnel. I often catch myself thinking, Diana, you don't have time for this. You don't have time to read a book right now. You don't have time to go to the beach. You literally just need to sit here and work and figure out how to make money. That is all that you're supposed to do. Like, figure your life out. You don't even know what your purpose is. Why on earth would you go to the beach right now and read? And I do want to say that I don't think that ambition is a bad thing. I'm a very ambitious and driven individual, and I don't think that's bad. However, what I'm realizing is that you should not be sacrificing every ounce of joy at the altar of productivity. Last week I got off work early because it was slow, and instead of rushing home and being like, what should I immediately do right now to get ahead, I packed a bag and I went to the beach at 1:30 on a random weekday. There was like a huge part of me that felt so guilty because I'm like, Diana, what are you doing? You need to be working, you need to be making money. Like, what on earth are you doing? I ended up reading my entire book. I went back home, I ended up editing a video, and I recorded myself making dinner. And here's the difference. I didn't do it because I had to. I didn't do it for content purposes. I did it because I genuinely wanted to, and that gave me a peace that I haven't felt in so long, and it just made me feel so good inside. I said this in my last video, but my goal is to step into this era of slow and intentional living. And it's funny because every single morning I wake up and in my journal I write, today I'm going to be intentional about what I do, because that does not come naturally to me. I'm 100% wired to go and chase and think in terms of ROI. If it doesn't make me money or give me an immediate return, I tend to dismiss it. But that is no way to live at all. What I want is to become the kind of person who does things purely for the sake of joy, because I believe that joy itself is productive. Joy itself is a return. So if you're tired of carrying it all by yourself, maybe this is your reminder to loosen your grip on everything that you're holding onto so tightly, to be still and to know that He is God. Even if you can't see Him working in your life, that does not mean that He's not there. At the end of the day, you don't need to see the whole path. You only need the courage to take the next faithful step ahead of you, and also the faith to know that you're not walking it alone. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give me a big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in our next one.